Zero-sum game basically means, in the simplest terms, is that if you win, I lose. If I win, you lose. Everything that you do in the company, everything that you activate, people do it. Organizations that I thought were very good and very bad, I then sort of crafted all of this in my head and I said, well, this is not how a business should work. This is not how we create good organizations that are self-sustaining, that really make an impact in the world. People are actually very fair animals. Just like crying, just like feeling bad feelings, whether it's jealousy, whether it's anger, fear, upset, all of that. Those are all very natural feelings that Homo sapiens, since the beginning of the time, have felt, and we will continue feeling those things, no matter how good we are. Every day, before you go to work, you should look in the mirror and be like, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. You are 31% smarter when you're in a positive mood.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh and Naik. One of the themes that we keep coming back to on this podcast is this idea of building high-performing organizations that can also outlast its creators, leaders, and founders. An important aspect of building such an organization is creating strong relationships and positive communication within and without the organization. To shed some light on this topic, I've invited a very special guest to join us. Idil Karateke is the host of 100-Some Game podcast, which explores with negotiation experts strategies that create 100% win-win outcomes. Idil, I'm pleased to have you on this podcast.
I'm so great to be here. It's so lovely. It's my first appearance as a podcast host on another podcast, so I'm so excited. And this is a very important topic that is really close to my heart, and I'm so excited to dive in.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's your opportunity to be on the other side of the mic, right? So
it's interesting.
Yeah. 100-Some Game. Now, I love that name, the idea of a 100-Some Game. So what was the inspiration behind that name, 100-Some Game, and what does it mean?
Yeah, so I studied economics in undergrad. I was very passionate about how people make decisions, etc., and how we can create better relationships in the business environment. So studying in economics, one concept that really stuck with me throughout the degree was this notion of zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
So game theory and all of that, there's so many theories in economics that describe how interactions work. And zero-sum game basically means, in the simplest terms, is that if you win, I lose.
Yeah.
If I win, you lose. There's no way we can live together if we can win together.
Mm-hmm.
And our outcomes sum up to zero. You're plus 50, I'm minus 50, and it sums up to zero. So that's where the concept is called zero-sum game.
Sure.
And studying economics alongside psychology with that degree, getting into the field of both marketing and finance, and making organizations that I thought were very good and very bad. I then sort of crafted all of this in my head and I said, well, this is not how a business should work. This is not how we create good organizations that are self-sustaining, that really make an impact in the world in terms of financial impact and in terms of, more environmental, more like qualitative impact.
Yeah.
And I said, well, a good method of it is actually 100-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that 100-sum game would basically mean that you and I having an interaction, having a discussion, increasing the size of the outcome. So if there's a pie, we increase the size of the pie, or both of our outcomes lend to 100%.
Sure.
And what this does is that, again, you win more, I win more, the organization wins more, there are better financial outcomes, better deals created in the future, better relationships. For example, if you are a company, a CPG company, and you manufacture deodorants.
CPG is
consumer packaged goods
sure.
company. So you manufacture deodorants. And so you need an avenue to sell those deodorants, which could be like Target or like Walmart, right?
Right.
So for example, you could have a deal with Walmart, one deal, and then you pursue this zero-sum game interaction where you're so aggressive, so assertive, you're like my way or the highway, you're not valuing their interests. So let's say you're a really good brand. So Walmart says like, okay, well, let's have your products in our shelves. But I guarantee you that there's not going to be an interaction with Walmart in the future.
Sure.
Because you've just pissed them off. You didn't consider their interests.
Right.
And what happened is that Walmart loses because they're not having a good deodorant on their shelves.
Right.
You lose because you're not on their shelf anymore and you're not selling. You just didn't make an avenue for creating better deals in the future. If Walmart likes you, you can negotiate with them to be the only deodorant, only men's deodorant, for example, on the shelves. You can negotiate those things. These are all based on human interactions.
Sure.
So with 100-sum game, you can do all of these things. So that's why it's really important.
Sure. So 100-sum is basically, let's say there's a piece of pie or a whole pie, and we both want to have the pie. So a win-lose is one person gets the whole pie, the other person gets nothing. Is that a good analogy? And then now there is a compromise in almost like in real estate. They say a good deal is when both parties walk away, giving away a little bit, right? You're not 100% satisfied, but you kind of got what you wanted almost. So that's like a compromise, right?
Yeah.
So you got 50%, 50%. Now 100-sum, I think what you're saying is more than that. Back in the day, there was a book called 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And he talked about the 4 quadrants. You talked about, so you have 2 lines, win, lose, top and bottom, and then left and right, win and lose. So right, left, win, lose. So you have 4 quadrants, win, 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 lose, lose, win, and then lose, lose. So the win-win, and then he also talked about this idea of synergy. So win-win is both sides win. I get what I want. You also get what I want, or what you want. You also get what you want. And so we're both happy. Now, synergy is what he calls 1 + 1 is not 2, 1 + 1 is 11. So 100-sum game seems like it's not just win-win, it's a little bit more than that. We both get what we want, but we create something that's so awesome, that is something that neither of us thought was possible. Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, exactly. And the one big negotiator, a top voice in the field that I took all of my inspiration from is Chris Voss. I believe you and some of the listeners do know him.
What's the last name?
And
Chris Voss.
Christopher Voss,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll put down the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, we will put that in the show notes for sure. And we'll put his book that I'm just about to mention.
Sure.
It's called Never Split the Difference.
Okay.
So when you said the win-win situation, real estate compromise, I don't get 100%, you don't get 100%, but we compromise and we leave by splitting the difference.
Sure.
And that's the name of this book, because that's exactly right. 100-sum is not that.
Right.
It is more like, how can we act in a way that we're not sitting across the table from each other? So we're sitting side by side,
right,
and we're collaborating. We are discussing to find a solution that is going to make both of us get more out of it.
Sure.
Because you know, and I know, and this is like a thing in game theory, like you know that I know, that you know, like da-da-da-da-da. So they know that if they try to negotiate with me to get what they want, and like, so the full of the pie, it's not going to be like 100%, because they know that by collaborating, they can actually get more out of the situation. So like in that quadrant, exactly 11, instead of getting like 2, there's a possibility for them to get 11.
Right.
And they know that collaborating with me will actually unlock that.
One of the focus we have is on this podcast is creating long-lasting organizations. Yeah. And in my view, one of the ways to create long-lasting organization is how strong the relationships are. So, right?
Yes.
So I think the way I see it, the relationships are the glue that holds the organizations together and make them strong or weak, depending on how strong the glue is, how good those relationships are, and how positive, not toxic, the opposite of toxic, how positive those relationships are. So, and having an organization, so if I want to build an organization like that, so take us back a little bit. What are the consequences? If you look at an organization, I know that you had experience applying some of these theories in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So if I'm building an organization like this, what are the pitfalls of not having a win-win or 100-sum or synergistic kind of relationships in organization, or maybe the culture is like that, or maybe the relationships are built in that way. So any thoughts on that? What are the pitfalls of not having, or what are the pitfalls of having zero-sum games being played in organization building?
Yeah. There are so many organizations who I believe, unfortunately, follow that type of culture.
Right.
And from CEO standpoint, or from people who are more financial driven people standpoint, they basically show up in the results,
Right.
in basically the financial results,
Sure.
the growth of the company,
Sure.
basically, because everything that you do in the company, everything that you activate, people do it.
100%. Yes.
People do it.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that people, whatever great idea that you have, whatever sort of investment that you're making, that you're trying to get the ROI from,
Sure.
even managing your balance sheet,
Right.
managing your cash flows, etc., it's all driven by people.
100%. Yeah.
And people usually forget that, because some of those big organizations, for example, like McDonald's, we somehow think that it just operates on its own, in this magical way.
Mm-hmm.
But we forget that people are the ones who are actioning it every day. So when you, as a lead, as a person hiring the organization, or as a manager,
right,
not an IC, an individual contributor, when you act in a way that makes people annoyed, makes people feel that they don't have a lot of value in the organization, makes people feel that they don't have a seat at the table, makes people feel that they just want you,
right,
because you're just there to make a deck, or you're just there to crunch the numbers, and you don't take the time to understand them, you don't take the time to invest in their growth. It mainly just focuses on it mainly has an impact on the results and the growth of the organization. But also, a lot of people, you build a bad reputation in the industry. So great talent does not want to get in your company, because words and reputations foster and they go around like cancer. They're almost like cancerous. If you have one bad reputation, someone else in the company, I can guarantee you that they're going to know about it in 2-3 days, even though they're in another different company. So you don't attract great talent who activate, who enable those great outcomes. You also have people who are just very, they hate going to work. We hear a lot of people who hate going to work. And when people hate going to work, that they're not going to be motivated to go above and beyond. They're not going to innovate. They're not going to bring new ideas to the table. And we know that a lot of organizations, Fortune 500, Fortune 50, a lot of them have been successful because of innovation. And innovation does come from people. Again, I come back to it. People say how did they, I don't know how this came about, this very new technology or this very new product. People think that it just came from thin air, whereas it's people who have enabled that. And those companies are Fortune 500, Fortune 50, because they have great leaders great managers who really care about their employees in different ways, and who remove their ego from the equation.
Sure. You mean that their own ego. So people are leaders, right? Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So you can't produce, you can produce, but you can produce a fraction of what you're capable of producing when you're not feeling like you're part of an organization that understands you or values you.
Yeah.
Right?
and you have the ability to take ownership. Because
Sure.
if you ask a lot of people what motivates them or why people leave organizations, it's they either and this is not a new thing that I'm saying.
Mhm.
Everyone, every like experts in the field, managers, leaders say this thing is that people don't leave organizations. People leave bad bosses. People
Yeah.
leave bad people, bad cultures.
Sure.
And when those great people leave, how are you going to unlock all this value? How are you going to do all your innovations?
Sure.
How are you going to grow financially?
Sure.
Who's going to manage all that stuff?
Yeah.
Who's going to bring new ideas to the table? Who's going to go work? Who's going to work until 3 a.m.?
Sure. And you mentioned financial impact. Funny thing is, if you look at any business you ask, if you say, look, show me your balance sheet or your income, your profit and loss statements, what's your biggest line item? What's your most, what's your most expensive line item? And 100%, I would say it's the salary.
People comp,
salary. Yeah,
people comp.
And the funny thing is that sometimes industry likes to formulate this in it's some kind of an ethical imperative, that it's some kind of a moral responsibility. And my argument to the business owners and business leaders is, no, this is not about morality of ethics. It could be, and it may or may not be, but this is bottom line. If you're already paying for this capacity and you're not utilizing it, and at the same time, so you're doing two things. You're underutilizing the capacity of your people, but at the same time, you're killing the spirit of the people. So when you can figure out a way to bring out the best in your people, you are also getting the most productivity out of the people. So it's a win-win. It's a to me, that's a 100-sum game. And and on that topic, what do you think should be the relation, the behavior that these leaders should exhibit? You're looking at CEO and then the executive management and then people who work for them. So there's a ripple effect that goes on inside the organization. Of course, there's the outside, but what should be some of the behavioral things that you can point out that these leaders, some practices probably, and some principles that these leaders should implement in their organization to create a 100-sum culture and 100-sum relationships?
Yeah. First of all, people, I think managers, and I've had a manager like that who just turned my life into hell because she was really focused on like task management.
Right.
And like those people who are really focused on like task management, they avoid difficult conversations.
Right.
They avoid delegating.
Sure.
They avoid really taking the time to understand how people are, feeling in a day.
Right.
How people are just, thinking about their work.
Right.
And they will go to all strengths to just like avoid dealing with people in a difficult way.
Sure.
So avoiding those difficult conversations.
Right.
So I think the biggest principle is, and I've read this at Chris Voss's organizations, one of the articles, is like every day before you go to work, you should look in the mirror and be like, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. So again, when you remove yourself from the ego, when you're empathetic, not sympathetic, remove yourself from the ego, remove your ego from yourself.
Sure.
And really focus on your people, the people who are above you, the people who are below you. You can unlock so much value because they will feel so heard.
Right.
They will feel so understood that they will go above and beyond for you.
Yes.
They will do the work that you hate doing because you've just given them so much understanding that they want to return that favor. People, people are actually very fair animals. We are very fair, actually. People, think that people they're unfair, like they don't return favors, etc. But people are actually, once you really have made them feel good, we're really wired to return the favor. And some big principle is understanding that you are not in the control of the conversation when you're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
You're in control of the conversation when you're listening to the other party.
Yes.
So, and leaders, they have a hard time listening
Mm-hmm.
because they think they're in the position of where they are because they did all the talking, they put all the ideas forward, they've actioned things, they've actioned it. And it's people think that action and speaking and doing
Mm-hmm.
is synonymous. However, not doing and listening is also maybe more important in terms of action.
Right.
In terms of action.
Yes.
So as a leader, I would recommend sparing at least 50 to 60% of your meetings, of your conversations, just listening.
Mm-hmm.
Asking calibrated questions to those. And this is also an idea that comes from Chris Voss's, expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Asking calibrated questions when people say something that that you don't understand at the moment, or something that you don't like at the moment, or you're just going to have a bad reaction to it,
Right.
So instead of having a bad reaction, just ask another question. Let them talk.
So so calibrated question, that term, what does that mean? So what are you calibrating? Are you calibrating to the response and just kind of adapting to what they're saying?
Yeah. So it basically is something, it may look like, why do you think like that?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a calibration question. Instead, you can ask, that's so interesting. What made you come to that decision?
Right.
Because since we were little, we are so wired to think that why has a negative connotation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when we were little, we would tip over a was, and then our parents would be like, why did you do that?
Right.
Or teachers in college, they're like, why did you like hit your friend?
Right.
Why are you speaking?
Right.
Shut up.
Yeah.
So we are wired to think that why is a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
So remove why and ask how and what questions.
Sure.
To get people to actually reveal their actual reservations and thoughts. And when people have the opportunity to talk, they actually like you better.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. This is, that's an adage from way back when, 1950s, a fellow by the name of Carnegie. Dale Carnegie wrote a book, Seek to Understand Before Being Understood, right? Funny thing, people don't practice this, even today. And because we are awash in advice, listen, and 50%, 60%, 70%. And I don't see it. I don't see a lot of people practicing it, and it's difficult, even from personal perspective. When you are an expert on something, it's hard to start talking and listen. Now, a couple of things that you mentioned. One is empathy versus sympathy. Can you explain that a little bit? So the mindset that we come to these conversations with, right? One is empathy versus sympathy. So what's the difference?
Some people really tend towards sympathy, which is, for example, if I tell you I had a really bad day at work, and you tell me, oh, really? I also had a really bad day at work. My boss did this. So you just introduce yourself to the equation, and the other party hates that because they're like, I thought you were going to talk about me.
This is about me.
Now the conversation.
Right. So we make it about you instead of them. Yeah.
Instead of them. Versus empathy would be like, I had a really bad day at work. And then you might respond, oh my God, really? What happened? Tell me more. Like, was it your boss? Was it your colleagues? Like, was it, a presentation didn't go well?
Right.
Like, what happened? Like, tell me more.
Tell me more. I love that. Yeah. Tell me more is a good question. Right.
Tell me more is a good question.
Open-ended, right? Open. It kind of draws them out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely is, and that really makes the other party. That really shows that you've removed yourself from the equation.
Sure.
And some people, I also used to default to sympathy before because I thought that would make people feel better and less alone.
Sure.
You're like, I'm also feeling like that. You're not alone, but actually, research shows that empathy is more important when you just like stop including yourself in their problems, stop introducing yourself to the conversation and just hone in on them. Like put your focus, put your spotlight on the other party.
Right.
Because as I said, once you do that, you've just given them something that's so good and something that they don't get quite often,
Yeah.
which will make them return the favor to you in some way or another.
Sure.
Maybe they will promote you
Mhm.
if they're your manager. Maybe they will give you a promotion,
Sure.
a salary raise. Maybe they will refer you to a recruiter.
Sure.
Maybe they will hire you.
Sure.
So many of these situations, or maybe, if it's a romantic situation, even maybe they want to date you.
Sure.
You know?
Right. And I think it also works in a flip way. If I'm a manager, I think that even as a manager, as a leader, as an executive, it never hurts to listen. I was just listening to a conversation somewhere where it might have been one of these big guys, Virgin Atlantic's CEO, I forget his name.
Yeah.
And
Richard Branson,
Richard Branson,
I think.
right. And he was saying that, I believe it might have been him. I don't know if I'm misquoting him or not. But the idea is that if you're an executive walking into a meeting with 20 people, and if you're the top dog, if you're the top guy there, everybody's going to stop and listen to you and look at you and, okay, the big guys in the room, right? And what he would say is that you say, carry on and start the meeting with the most junior person in the room, because and then he speaks last, because if he speaks first, then everybody else is going to kind of agree with him, right? So then he doesn't get the true feeling, the true facts that he's after. So he basically wants to give other people space. So he doesn't want to talk, he wants to listen. And that's a powerful kind of way to come across. It's kind of a powerful presence that you bring to, and you have a more gravitas. If you just want to be a big guy, and if you want to just kind of throw your weight around, the best way to do it is not by talking so much, but listening, right? It gives you more presence.
Love that.
Right?
I love that. And this is actually this is a way that this is a good example of removing your ego,
right?
Right. So I assume that he has made peace and he knows how to manage his ego.
Sure.
Because a lot of the big guys, people like Richard Branson, who are almost like celebrities, right?
Yes.
They're so afraid to not be the first one to talk, because they think that, other people are going to think that I don't have the authority.
Sure.
Other people are going to think that I don't have opinions,
Sure.
or I'm not qualified for this role.
Right.
People are going to think I'm a fraud, or I have to handle this people, because what if they hate me, and then try to do bad, either try to get another CEO on board,
Sure.
or there are so many things going on in people's head at that time, which makes, and ego is driving that, which makes them, talk more, be the one who's and being comfortable when people agree with you, and being uncomfortable when people don't agree with you, because when people don't agree with you, they think oh my God, they don't think that I have the power, the authority to lead this organization.
You're hitting on something so important. So that's why I want to kind of interject here. I think what you're saying is that this comes with confidence. So if you are actually a more confident person, if you really are deeply anchored within yourself, you know who you are, and you're not nervous, you're not insecure, you are confident, then you'll be able to listen better. Then you will be able to sit back better. Then actually the more confident you are, the more you're able to not let your ego get in other people's conversations. Do you agree with that? Is that what you're saying?
100%,
right?
Yeah. It's really important, because confidence sells too.
Yes.
People say a lot of, there are these instant confidence boosters that you can do in 3 minutes to increase that confidence before a presentation, before a meeting. Sure. Because again, when you have that confidence, you're more able to practice these behaviors that are that ROI positive, that listening, for example. Sure. And if you're, as you said, if you're not confident, then if you're insecure, then you're gonna be in a negative mindset, and you're gonna always try to talk more. Right. You're gonna always try to have control, whereas that's counterintuitive.
Sure, absolutely. So listening is definitely one. Empathy versus sympathy. So kind of getting yourself in their shoes and trying to
Yeah.
feel what they're feeling, and 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 coming across basically as a person who is listening to what you have to say and totally respects
Yeah.
you. There's ego and the self. So is there I know you are a are you psychology major, or you studied psychology in college, right?
Psychology and econ double major, yeah.
Psychology and econ double major. I love that. So psychology is basic. So what's the psychological underpinning behind some of these things? And you mentioned ego and the self. Is there something that's going on there? What is that?
Yeah. So basically, one of the first things that you learn if you're ever studying psychology, or if you're getting a degree, reading something, etc., is humans being so different than animals. And the biggest reason of that is our self-awareness, and it's our attachment to ego.
Right.
There are so many theological, religious practices and beliefs in Buddhism that says ego is the biggest reason for our misery,
Sure.
for our suffering. If you detach yourself, I think it was Taoism, if you detach yourself from the ego, then that means like you've basically solved all of your miseries. I mean, that's the reason that you get a lot of these like insecurities, jealousy, ambition, passion, even positive feelings are determined by the ego.
Sure.
And people, the biggest thing is that we always forget, but what we should be understanding is that people are really interested in being respected, being seen as someone who's important.
Right.
Important is being important. And obviously a good practice is having the ability to deal with your ego.
Sure.
But you also have to understand, and this is also a game theory technique, is that you have to know what the other party is thinking at the moment. You have to know the other party's status.
Sure.
And that is that a lot of people don't know how to manage their ego, and they're still very driven by ego, and you have to just find a way to deal with it.
Sure.
And that is a good ways to managing the other party's ego, but without being too obvious, because a lot of people have also experienced that if you're not complimenting but practicing flattery, if you're just being too obvious, the other party can also pick up on that. So you have to find that balance, and you always have to be one step ahead, just like in chess. You have to be one step ahead, and being one step ahead is always thinking, if I do X, what will the other party feel or think?
Right. Sure. So, a couple of things that you said, I wanted to tie those thoughts. I think one of the things you said is that, okay, so I'm showing up here, and I'm dropping my ego. But I think what you say is that just because I'm dropping my ego doesn't mean that they've dropped their ego. Their ego is still there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So I need to manage that. Now, this again ties back into having the self-confidence that even though the other side has an ego, and they might be demonstrating that, displaying it, and it's there. It's always there. We all have egos. 7 billion people. Maybe 1 or 2 people on the planet are truly have transcended their ego, or maybe they just come around once every 1,000 years. Who knows? But the rest of us, we have an ego. But then right underneath what you call, I think you called it self, this idea of connectedness, that is this big background. That is all of us. We're connected, the one, right? And some people call it, the Buddhism, they probably call it consciousness or awareness. So that's your background. And within that, there's an idea of this person who is the separate person, the ego, right?
Yeah, the separate person.
And that's the one who's suffering. It feels wonderful some days. It doesn't feel so good some days. And you showing up, and there's this other person who is also going through all of these other things, right? All their suffering, quote unquote. So then what you're saying is that I need to manage that. And that's the skill. I think that you can
Yes.
probably work on this skill your entire life, because this is a
Yeah.
game where there are no rules, right? The other person's going to have their ego. So, and you pointed out a number of the techniques for doing that. One is obviously listening and drawing them out, because we all want to be heard and listened to and understood. But then you also said that I need to know where they are. So that's the chess game. I need to know
Where they
where
are on
they
the
are.
board, exactly.
Right. So how do I do that? Is it like an intuition, or are there any techniques to know where they are?
I'm gonna give some tips, and then I'm gonna give an example,
Okay.
a very personal example
Sure.
to that.
Sure.
A good way to know where the person is on the board is basically reading the other party's body language.
Okay.
I think reading a room, reading the body language
Sure.
is so important.
Sure.
So for example, I'll tell you, if you ask something to someone, and then if they're doing something like this,
Right.
if they're playing,
Right.
if they're playing with their face, hair,
Right.
if they're playing with their clothes,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, more than 90% of the time they're lying.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're not being truthful at that moment,
Mhm.
or they're scared of something. So people
Sure.
are really scared of lying. People are,
Sure.
because they're scared that we're gonna discover that lie.
Yes.
So they're trying to escape the situation
Right.
by by just like
Doing
playing
something.
with
Right.
something.
Right. Scratching
Playing
the nose,
something,
the nose,
doing that, scratching the nose,
Yeah.
playing with the head. So pick up on those things.
Right.
And how do you do that? We come back to what we spoke in the beginning.
Right.
Put the spotlight on the other person, because when you're speaking with the other party, most of the times we're not really paying attention to the other person.
Sure.
We're paying attention to ourselves.
Yeah.
How am I going to respond?
Mhm.
How did my question land?
Right.
What am I going to ask after?
Right.
What am I going to do after this? I have a meeting.
Sure.
My daughter pissed me off in the morning.
Right.
We're always in our head. Why? Because of our egos. Because our egos always trying to protect ourselves. Is my question landing well? What am I going to ask after? Why is what I'm going to ask after important?
Sure.
Because I want to look good.
Right.
Because I want to look smart.
Right.
So it all comes down to this one specific team.
Right.
But if you're able to remove that,
Right.
and then put the spotlight on the other person, you're able to tell if they're lying. And
Sure.
if you, for example, are 80% sure, 70% sure that they're lying, you can ask a question like, it seems like there's something bothering you.
Right.
It seems like there's more here than meets the eye.
Right. Those are good questions.
And with a dynamic silence.
Yeah. Dynamic
Which
silence.
will-
So I'm going to kind of park that in my head
Yeah.
right now. So I want to come back to that, but please go ahead.
Yeah. And these are all things that I've learned from the masters
Yeah.
in the field.
Sure.
That I've practiced and seen it be very effective.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, once you practice it, you said intuition, right?
Right.
And intuition, some people are better than it than others. However, I've heard and I do believe that this is a skill that can be bettered and can be learned.
Sure.
So if you practice every day in low stakes situations with the grocery, with the call center clerk, with the grocery clerk, with your delivery, with your Uber driver,
Yeah.
with your mom, with your sister.
Yeah.
So if you practice these in low stakes situations, then you're able to gain this intuition, practice.
Yeah.
So when it happens in a work situation, a professional environment, when the stakes are high,
Yeah.
then you're better equipped
Yeah.
with the skill. How you can also understand where the party is at that moment where they are is always preparation. I'm a big preparation person.
Yeah.
So almost play the situation. And this is probably a lot of folks have tuned into depth versus herd cases.
Sure.
And the lawyers who manage the case talk about scenario thinking, talk about playing scenarios.
Right.
So I'm also going to give that sort of example, give that advice here, is that before you have a big conversation, before you have a big deal, big negotiation, why don't you scenario play it in your head?
Sure.
You say, like, if I start this conversation, if I said this,
Yeah.
have maybe another party, have your
Right.
sister, have your friend
Right.
respond to that.
Sure.
you know, and have another person respond to that.
Right.
Try a different question, have them respond to that.
Sure.
Do your preparation, do your homework.
Sure.
A lot we don't tend to think that conversations are something to be prepared, like presentations, you know, like
Conversation.
presentations or something that I'm pitches.
Right.
But conversations are also pitches.
Right.
So do your homework. Think of it in your head. That's how you know
Sure.
the different places where the person will be on the chessboard.
Sure.
And that's what I spoke about. You have to know where the person will be
Right.
if you say X.
Right.
And how you do that is another way of is the scenario thinking, because
Sure.
we always tend to think like, I will say something like, and we never think how it's going to land on the other party.
Right. How they're going to respond.
So what if you don't think that, you've just given the other party the upper hand.
Absolutely. Right. So you said a couple of big strategies. One is, and they are huge. One is practice in low risk situations. I love that.
Yeah.
And with everyone, because then you begin to develop this. There is intuition, but there is also that's just the feedback that we get, the sensory feedback that we get from our environment. And if you don't have practice doing this with other people,
Yeah.
we really don't, we kind of feel out of sorts and we can't execute it properly. So practice. This is a touch sport and we got to practice it, right? So that's
100%.
and low risk situation. One more thing that I want to add to the list of people you practice with is children. They're wonderful people to practice with. They're honest.
Yeah.
They'll tell you to your face if you're, I love playing with, trying some of these things with 6-year-olds. And I showed some of my videos to my 6-year-old niece. And the feedback I got was, oh my God, it took me a couple of days to recover from that because it was honest. But that's exactly what I needed. It's like they're honest in a very guileless way. So you don't take it personally, right? And the second thing is playing out the scenarios. And this is also difficult because, see, if I want to practice a presentation, I know exactly what I'm going to say. So then I can practice this over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And then I do it 6th time or 10th time.
Yeah.
I'm done, right? I know that I have it. But I don't know when it's a conversation. I don't know how the other. So I can't practice chess, for example. There are moves that I can practice. There's set of moves. There are strategies that I can practice, and that's what they do. The chess players. But at the end of the day, you cannot practice every scenario, right? So this is why people probably avoid it. But what you're saying is that you got to practice it still, because because they all do. The top players practice all these moves, knowing full well that when you come to the board, it may all fall apart. So same thing may happen in a conversation, right? Like you and I, we've hashed out some of the ideas that we want to talk about. But when the conversation happens, it's in the moment. Right. And, we have to kind of, because that's the fun of the game, right? How it unfolds in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, with presentations, for example, I want to add that build. People, me, you, everyone else, they practice what they're going to say. They're like, this is the deck I'm going to practice, but they don't practice what other people, or they don't think how other people are going to react to that. So why don't you also practice a sample Q&A?
Yes.
Why don't you also practice, when you're presenting something, a big idea that's like that it's gonna create some of tension.
Right.
You're like, okay, how I'm gonna respond.
Yeah.
But in your head, just move yourself from the presentation to the sitting table and be like, I'm listening to this. What questions am I having in my head? I'm the CEO. What do I care about? I care about the bottom line. I care about growth. I care about market share, etc. So how is what I'm saying gonna please the CEO? What questions might the CEO have?
Sure.
So that's how you can do scenario thinking. If you don't not only practice what you're gonna say, but also practice what other people are thinking.
Sure. Right. And what the response might be, right? From how
what the response
they
might be.
How they might respond to it. Right.
Yeah, and I want to give this example. I forgot to give before, but for example, about what we said with like egos and knowing where the other party is,
Right.
and reacting to that, right? So at a previous workplace, I was very determined. So as an employee, what really motivates me is like if I'm able to add something to the table, if I'm able to do some sort of a new thing, whether it's improving the processes, improving how we do some of the things and make it more efficient.
Right.
And while I'm doing this and showing to another analyst that I was training, so you can imagine myself and you can imagine, how I would think in that situation, right?
Yeah.
And my boss came to me and so the conversation happened. She was like, I assure you that once you leave, because we were going to be rotating
Mm-hmm.
into other teams, once you leave, we're going to go back to the old method.
Okay.
And then she left.
Mm.
So you can imagine, right? How she has no clue about human interactions. She has no clue about dealing with people,
Sure.
about the egos of people, about the impact of the words she has on other people.
Sure.
So me knowing all of this, obviously, like, as I said, people don't leave organizations, people leave
The bosses. Yeah.
the bosses,
Mhm.
right? So in that case, when she has said something like that to me and made me upset, what's going to happen? I'm not going to help her do X, Y, Z. I'm not going to feel good about her. First of all, I'm not going to be speaking well about her to the analyst
Sure.
who's going to be on our team.
Right.
So, because that's my peer, and peers influence peers more
Right.
than managers influencing peers, because we think on the same level.
It's
We're
important
closer in
takeaway.
age.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're closer in age. And if that analyst is scared of you, doesn't like you, how do you expect that analyst to go above and beyond for you?
Sure.
And the biggest thing is the impact. The biggest thing is she not thinking about the impact that will have
Right.
on me, on her, on the environment, because she thinks that we underestimate people. She thinks that, oh, she's just an analyst, she can't do anything.
Right.
Even if she feels bad, this is not going to have any impact on me. But if I feel bad about her, I'm not going to help her out when she's in a bad situation.
Sure.
I'm not going to be motivated to come to work and do the best work.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about this to other people,
Sure.
to the other analysts. And what happened in the end is actually that analyst went to another team.
Right.
So he didn't want to stay with her.
Mm-hmm.
He went to another team. So what happened? At the end, she lost.
Sure. So let's take that and let's play that out. That's an excellent scenario to play. So maybe you can do a little bit of a role play type of thing where how would she behave in the 100 some way? When she showed up in that moment, it's the moment, but also everything that happened before that. So there is a cultural aspect of it. That's the environment
Mm-hmm.
within which we operate that kind of, that breeds certain behaviors, right? So it feels normal to behave in a certain way,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
what would be a more ideal situation, and what would be a better interaction that would make you want to respond to her positively?
Yep. So first of all, I fully agree with the organizational aspect of it. So that organization is an organization that encourages those type of behaviors, very toxic. And again, when I said about reputation being almost like cancerous,
Yeah.
it's just like once it's somewhere, it affects the whole body, right? In that case, market, the professional market. So everyone knows about how toxic the organization is.
Right.
But besides that, how she would have reacted is like this. So I will first tell you what she's thinking as the manager.
Mm-hmm.
So you see an analyst working on something that has been there for a while, and she's trying to improve it, and you don't align with it.
Right.
You don't think that's a good idea. You don't think that's it. So that's probably what she thought, right? That's why she said they're going to go back to the old method as soon as I leave.
Right.
So instead of acting like that, she could be like, oh, start positively, right? Oh, well, I love that you're thinking about those things. I love that you're passionate and you're thinking about improving our processes. That's really interesting. You know what? Let's book a time together in my calendar in some of like the less busy days, let's say Friday evening, and actually walk me through this. You know, like I'm curious. We may or may not adopt this, but I really appreciate your effort and I really appreciate your thinking. And let's walk through this. Maybe we can find a nice way.
Right. A common ground or
a common ground.
Right.
So what you've did there is first of all, you are and I learned this from Chris Voss as well. You are 31% smarter when you're in a positive mood.
31%.
So
that's a good takeaway.
31% smarter. Very
positive mood.
Smarter.
I love that because one of the things that I like to study, and I have my own version of this, is emotional scale. When you're feeling better, you behave better, you produce more, you are more innovative, more inspired. But you're actually giving a number here. What you're saying is that when what is that? When you feel better, you're 31% smarter.
When you're in a positive frame of mind, and this is
okay.
Yeah,
love that.
If you know Chris Voss, if you've watched or listened or read any of his resources, you've probably heard this before,
right?
Or you're just hearing it right now, and you can go and like look.
Yeah,
you can look it up and know more about it. But you're 31% smarter. So when you're reacting positively, your brain is wiring its positive, quote unquote, positive neurons.
Sure.
So manager itself, you're smarter. You know how to collaborate and you're just in a positive mood that you can go and like do better work. But you also put the analyst in a positive mood that will make her smarter as well.
Sure.
That will make her react better. That will make her produce more better work. That will make her have a better conversation. And you've also, what you've done is you've managed their ego.
Right.
Because that person who's trying to do something, ultimately, they're trying to do something better for the organization.
Right.
That's the end goal, right? Yeah. Let's take a step back and look at the end goal. The analyst is trying to make your life easier. The analyst is trying to make other people's life easier. Make make the process efficiently, so we have more time for more strategic work that's moving the needle. So in an umbrella, like in a nutshell, that's the end goal is. So as a manager, if you have that sort of emotional intelligence, you're able to understand that, and you give credit to where it's due.
Sure.
So that alone, and employees thinking about those things involuntarily, it's not in their job description. It's not what was expected. They're doing it because of their own will.
Right.
So that's even a big, unlock that you want to have as an employer. Sure. So you give credit to where it's due. And then, you never know. You hire the analyst because they possess certain skill sets that you want. So there is a good % chance that actually what they're trying to do can actually be good for you. Even at the first glance, you don't like it. But as I said, increasing the size of the pie, when you collaborate, 30 minutes, right? Sparing 30 minutes is not gonna make or break the whole business. Sure. So sparing 30 minutes, maybe in true collaborating, maybe you can actually come to a method of streamlining that process that both of you won at the end of the day.
You both won.
And the business.
Yes, and the business, obviously, because you produced good things for the business, the right things.
Yes, and the business, the right things. Right. So if you work more efficiently, if you streamline the process as a business, then you have more time for strategic work. You use labor more efficiently.
Right. Sure. And something else that kind of popped in my head as you were saying this is the fact that there's sometimes someone is in a toxic environment. Working like this. Let's pretend I'm a manager, like in your example, the manager who walks up to you. And if I'm a manager who works in a toxic environment that doesn't support the positive behaviors, that doesn't mean that I don't have the power to behave in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
Because I still have 100% ability to understand, to empathize, to have the emotional intelligence, to listen. And to say, let me hear you, right? Let's schedule a time to talk about this so that I can
Yeah.
understand what you really, and I may or may not agree with you, but at least let's sit down and explore this. And that is 100% under her control, right? So culture affects us, but at the same time, we also have the autonomy to work within a culture in a positive way, right? So,
Yeah.
so the techniques that you're showing us, basically, I think is the techniques that can be used by anyone in any cultural type of an environment. You used a couple of terms, and I want to know a little bit more about them. One is the dynamic silence. And
Yeah.
this emotional intelligence thing, I hear everybody's talking about this. There was a guy called Daniel Goleman. A long time ago, he wrote this book. I think that's where the term comes
The
from.
term came
But
about.
people
Yeah.
throw it around. And I don't really
Yeah.
understand. I kind of have an idea of what it means, but I have a reaction to that. But I want to know what your definition of emotional intelligence is.
Mm-hmm. It comes about, so it shows itself in two ways. The first and the most important thing is managing your own emotions
Right.
and emotional
Okay,
awareness.
sure.
So emotional
Perfect.
regulation. That's I think what makes up most of the emotional intelligence. So
Managing your own emotions.
I actually
Yeah.
managing your own emotions. So I actually have it up on my board there.
Yeah.
So there's 5-step process of managing your emotions.
Right.
So first of all, and that also makes you respond, not react.
Yes.
Because reacting is so bad, responding is good.
Right.
So for example, first you notice the emotion.
Right.
And you can have, for example, something that you always get back to. So for example, you train yourself or you practice this notion that whenever I'm heated up,
Yeah.
like I'm noticing it. I'm noticing what's happening in me. My palms are sweating. I'm getting, weird feelings in my stomach. Like I'm feeling something not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have an anchor for
Okay.
that. So for example, a pen or a glass of cup
Sure.
or your phone.
Right.
So in that way, you say to yourself that whenever I notice that, instead of like just being like, oh, hold up, or like just showing that
Right.
in your face as well. Because once you show anger, fear, upset, all of these emotions in your face, the other party will pick up on it and will use it against
Right.
you. So how do you play this tactfully, strategically? So you can maybe have an anchor. You're like, and this you I think you told about me about your rubber band too, right? So a pen or an ankle, you don't even have to use the pen, but just holding it in your hand.
Right.
And that makes you come back to your baseline.
Sure.
Because then you're shifting your focus to your anchor.
Yeah.
You're shifting your focus to your mug.
Right.
You're still listening, but that neurons firing up in your head and they're making you go in your fight, flight, or freeze. You're inhibiting that. You're saying no, your cortisol levels hiring, and you're just holding your mug, or you're holding your pen, or you're holding your phone like this.
Yeah.
You're not playing, but you're holding your phone like this, so that you shift the attention from that fight or flight or freeze to that anchor.
That anchor, right. So when we started this interview, I normally have a pen in my hand and I have some paper in front of me. I forgot to do it. So just about 5 minutes ago, I don't know if you noticed, I pick up a pen and writing it down. So now a lot of the times I don't necessarily read what I've written down, but it's like you're saying, it's a psychological anchor, right?
Yeah.
So that it's my baseline, so that I can, if I don't know what to do, and if I'm processing my own emotions and I need to figure out what I'm feeling and things like that, I can just start writing with my pen.
Writing. Very good. That's very good.
Right.
And you can
That's
say something
technique.
like, once you're writing, and once you're writing, you can say something like, excuse me, I'm not distracted. I'm trying to understand you better, and I'm trying to collect my thoughts. So I'm taking some notes here.
There you go. And it's...
You don't have to take notes.
Right.
You can write your date of birth. You can write your favorite song.
Or scribble something.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Scribble something on it. But at least that's what the perception is you're giving to the other party, because perception is reality.
Sure. And it's a socially acceptable thing to do. right?
Yeah.
So if I'm writing and it also is a subconscious, what we call stroke. It's a compliment to the other person that they're saying something of importance that I'm
I
writing
love
down
that.
on a sheet of paper. So they
I
think
love
that
that.
they're saying something important, and they're being heard and understood, and
And you're managing their ego in
and you're
that way.
managing their ego in that way. Wonderful. Yeah, I love it.
Because everyone wants to be seen as important.
Yes.
And this is also one of quotes that I've heard from the masters at Chris Voss's organization, is that even if doesn't matter if you're a terrorist,
Right.
if you're a businessman, if you're a high school kid,
Right.
is all the motivations are the same. We just want to feel important.
Yes.
We just want to feel like we're saying something of importance, and we're being respected.
Right.
Respect is really important.
Yeah.
That's what people seek a lot.
Sure, absolutely. And you mentioned rubber band for our listeners. I had shared a technique we were talking about this, and one of my anchoring techniques that I tried for a while was to have a rubber band around my wrist. And before the conversation starts, now this is not a socially accepted behavior, so it's not like having a pen and paper, but so what I would tell them is that, listen, I have this habit. I interrupt when I talk or when somebody's talking, and I am not paying attention to what I should be paying attention to, which is you and what you are sharing. And I have a habit of talking too much. So when I do that, to kind of remind myself, I take my rubber band and I snap myself. So if you see me do that, don't get concerned, because that's all I'm doing. It's something like that. So that kind of breaks the ice.
Yeah.
You put some humor into it, and at the same time, I made myself vulnerable. And I'm human. I'm saying I'm not perfect, right? So, and in my business, they expect me to understand and listen. And here's a guy who does this professionally, and he has a technique for not doing something like this. So that creates more of a human connection with the other person.
And when people see that and that's the biggest thing with leaders too. Leaders really do need to be vulnerable with their teams. They need to, come into terms with themselves and with the other party that they don't know all the answers.
Yes.
You're just like you're doing that as a profession, but you have these vulnerabilities too. So hence you need some coping strategies, which is like the rubber band, right? And when people hear that, they're like, then all of a sudden you're so relatable.
Right.
Then, because when you're in that position of authority, people think that it's a little unreachable.
Right. Yeah.
It's a distance. And people get a little scared. They're like, I want to be you, but I don't know how.
Right.
But once you build that connection of like, you know what, I'm also human. Like, I don't do this perfectly. I don't know all the answers. I have this bad habit. Hence, I need to do this thing, but don't worry. Right. People are like, you know what? I think that I can
also
be
like
this
that.
person.
Yeah, right.
I'm also like that. And you just made the other party feel so good. Right. So now they're gonna, you've built that whole human connection, and they're just gonna be so interested in whatever you're saying. Right. They have a higher likely chance of agreeing with you, even if this wasn't something that they would have agreed. Right. But because you've built that, you've broke that ice, you've did all of these things that we spoke about, they have a higher chance of agreeing with you, because if you're likable, people will do anything for you. And I've did that at a low stakes situations yesterday, and then maybe I can give that example later. But of this, if people like you, they'll do anything for you type of thing.
Yeah. So let's see if we have the time. We've covered a lot, and we may have to do that the next time when we do one of these things. I do want to get back to dynamic silence that you had mentioned. Mm-hmm. What is that?
So this is also a term that Chris Voss and experts in hostage negotiations have coined and have practiced and spoken about. And I've also practiced it in my own experience and seen the benefits. Right. Dynamic silence is basically when you're saying something. For example, like, it seems like you're really interested in chess.
Right.
And if the other party doesn't respond in 1 or 2 seconds, we tend to continue. You're like, oh, well, I thought that because, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't be afraid of silence. And have this like silence that is uncomfortable, but it's dynamic because it's going to get the conversation going, and it's gonna, the effect that it will have is it will get the other party thinking about themselves. They're like, yeah, I actually do like chess. Like, and then they said like, oh, it's so great that you just recognize that about me. You made them feel good. Right. Or like you say that, oh, there's something that's bothering you. So they're going to say like, they're going to think they're in their head and be like, is it really bothering me? Maybe it is really bothering you, but you just addressed the elephant in the room. So now they're going to think like, it's actually not really bothering me. Sure. So in that, if once you keep that silence before the rest of the conversation goes, it will help you gain better information, and really help build that connection with the other party.
Sure, great. Thanks for explaining that. Coming to 100-Some Game, your podcast.
Yeah.
What was your inspiration behind starting the podcast? What did you have a sort of an idea of what it would be like? There's 2 questions. I'm sorry, I'm asking you 2 questions at the same time. So let's take one at a time. What was the inspiration behind starting your podcast?
So I said, since I was little, I was very interested in how people would make decisions, getting to yes, and how to influence people and how to get people to do what you want type of stuff. Like, and I was little, that's where my mind would go, what was going. And then during the pandemic, I got really interested in Chris Voss's work. Sure. And hostage negotiations and his masterclass and his books and his workshops, blah, 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 all of that. And then I also, but I was like, okay, I want to do something with this, but I don't know what. And then I actually, after facing being in situations where I saw people not knowing how to influence people, not knowing how to persuade, and actually making other people feel better, being in the vulnerable situation myself, facing microaggressions, and also because of this, I've also faced in myself that, I could have negotiated my value better. I could have done this. I could have, persuaded XYZ better. So now, because I've learned it, I feel like I've learned it the hard way. Now I feel like I want to inspire people to not do the mistakes that I've did, and not, practice better negotiation tactics so that they can unlock so much value in their life and in their career, and they can inspire people. So that's why the podcast tries to inspire people in twofold. One is negotiation, this 0-sum game, 100-sum game notion. We can unlock so much value. We can create better deals, increase the size of the pie if we approach it in a 100-sum mindset. And the second fold is that negotiation is everywhere. Whether that doesn't matter your industry, your title, your contacts, whether you're a CEO or IC, etc. You can just do so much better, get so much out of life through employing these persuasion and influencing tactics.
And the guests that you have are experts or negotiators within different industries, different verticals?
Yeah. So I have guests from like top organizations like Google, Apple, McKinsey, Unilever. So, and they speak about, there are basically value creators. They have people who've built great teams, who've accelerated in their career, who are known to influence their seniors to execute great ideas that people think are undoable, or there are people who have persuaded the unpersuadable, if you will.
Unpersuadable. I like that. Yes.
Yeah, because it is, you can actually, everything is negotiable. Everything is persuadable. But and how does that happen in a specific industry? How does that happen if you're in brand management? How can you do that if you're a management consultant? How can you do that if you're an entrepreneur? How can you do that if you're a software engineer? There are, different best tactics and practices and notions and mindsets and ways of communication if you are in those different industries. So that's why I want to shed light into that, because the way to negotiate in the best way might be different if you're a software engineer, and the mindsets and the tactics might be different if you're a software engineer versus a brand manager, for example.
Yeah. Awesome. That sounds exciting.
Yeah. I'm very grateful for all the love and the feedback that I got.
You're an entrepreneur, and the journey of entrepreneurialism is not always, moonlight and roses. So I like to ask this question because I think it tells a lot about who we are at our core, right? Was there ever a moment when you thought that you wanted to give up, or you wanted to kind of say, all right, I'm done with this. I'm going to throw in the towel and go do something else?
For sure. It's definitely not for everyone. And I do believe that in my career goal, I do see myself, I will always be an entrepreneur. I will always, have this in my life. But I also feel I also think that, for my career and for what I want to do in the future, I also, want to lead a brand, grow a brand, like a package goods type of brand. But you always have to be an entrepreneur at heart. And as you said, even if you're in a corporate environment, and as you said, it's very tough and it's not for everyone. And it is basically, you have to be okay with working 24/7. You have to be okay with failure. You have to be okay with people hatred and getting hate comments and people being very showing, doing things that will bring you down.
And
because I feel like people do think about failure and trying again, etc. But you also have to think about the other people who are trying to bring you down. As we go back, let's go back to the chess thing, the board thing, right? You have to understand where the people are, because if you don't understand that, you will give into the strategies of the people who are trying to bring you down, and then you will lose. But you have to understand where they're coming from. Why are they trying to bring you down? All of that. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And I think I've always, I started a business, a startup when I was in university as well, and pitched it to the university, which I was a part of the Accelerator Hub. So I've always been that, and I've had, so many days where I just cried and felt so bad, and that's a part of the emotional regulation. That's a normal behavior. People hate and people feel so embarrassed that they feel so bad and then cry, essentially feeling those normal feelings. People feel so bad because they are feeling those normal feelings. But as a part of the emotional regulation, you have to accept that behavior. You can feel it. Let sit with that for a while. Sit with it for 5-6 hours, no matter how long it takes. But always have a comeback plan once you're ready.
When you say accept your behavior, accept your own behavior of crying. I think what you're saying is that, especially for guys, this is it's hard. If I'm feeling bad or sad, or if I cry, just another part of me saying, "Come on, stop crying." What a sissy you are, right?
Yeah,
that sort of thing. So
exactly, people say stop crying to you every time,
and then it becomes part of the conditioning. So you say to yourself that I shouldn't be crying. But I think what you're saying is that you got to own it. You gotta give yourself permission to feel that way, and move through it and own it, and then process it, and then get back into the good place. Good
exactly.
Place, right?
It's easier to get back into that good feeling place if you actually sit with it for a while, because that's a normal reaction of the body. And if you don't allow your body, for example, if you're vomiting, you can't stop vomiting. You can't stop that. Your body has to throw that out. There's no way that even if people tell you stop vomiting, or if you say yourself stop vomiting, you have to vomit that
Sure.
out. Just like crying, just like feeling bad
Right.
feelings, whether it's jealousy, whether
Anger.
it's
Yeah.
anger, fear, upset, all of that. Those are all very natural feelings that Homo sapiens, since the beginning of the time, have felt, and we will continue feeling
Sure.
those things, no matter how good we are. So once you have that, feel it. Don't condemn yourself. Don't ruin your motivation, or just say bad things. Pick yourself apart for feeling that. But versus accept that, say like, this will happen, and I'm feeling it. For example, shut yourself in your room. Just whatever coping mechanism you have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then have a comeback plan once because none of these huge feelings like vomiting, vomiting only lasts for about 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Crying, once you cry, it can last, depending on the situation, 10 hours. It's never going to last 48 hours.
Sure.
You can have grief, you can have sadness, but that heightened feeling of where you're crying, where you're anxious, where you're having a panic attack will only last for a short amount of time. So let it last, because if you let it last, it will actually pass by quicker, and then you can have a comeback plan. Some
wise words there from you, and that's a lot to process, and I think it's very useful to live in the age that we live in. We live in this. It's almost like you're in this place where you're just exposed from all directions. You have the social media, and everything is being recorded more or less. So these coping mechanisms and skills and strategies for self-management, they're very, very important, and I think they'll be more important as we get into the future, right? So
I agree.
what do you think on that point? What do you think? Where do you think we're going as a society in terms of 100-some world? Do you have any ideas about that? Any thoughts on that?
I do see a lot of leaders, in these top organizations really adopting this behavior. There's a lot of research going on. Research as in like, these surveys or these sort of like, I think examples that, Harvard Business Reviews and all of these publications give. And as the information is more accessible to everyone, and as we're sort of seeing the implications of bad leaders, etc., through social media, through all of that, I think people are getting more and more, knowledgeable on this field, and people are seeing the importance of it more and more. So I'm hopeful for for the future in terms of that. However, accepting that there will always be organizations who have this ingrained, rooted behavior culture, this toxic culture, that it will forever be like people who are in this organization will be like that. It will forever be like that. You don't see them as succeeding, being like a McDonald's, being like IBM, being like Apple, right? They will be still be known brands, but they won't be market leaders. They won't be, the best of the best. They will tag along, and it's okay if you're a person like that. If that suits you, you do you. But for people, for those organizations, I feel like a lot of people are understanding who they are and what they are, and making the decisions for themselves.
So if someone wants to get in touch with you, Idil, what is the best way for them to contact you or connect with you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me through LinkedIn, through my email. So we'll write my email in the show notes, but basically it is my name, idal.karateke@mail.yourtoronto.ca. Shoot me some the questions you have, thoughts, comments, feedback, everything. I love feedback. I love If you are not agreeing with any of the things I've said, feel free to just shoot me a message to have a discussion. I'd love to do that. You can also connect with me on Instagram. I'm also very active on Instagram. Shoot me a DM, shoot me a message there. And those are the three best ways that you can reach me.
Idil, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your passion. This was a very enlightening conversation. I learned a lot from you. And you shared a lot of nuggets of gold. And as I added this and putting it, process it and put it out, I'm going to actually learn more. But that's one of the things that I love the best about what I'm doing here with this podcast, which is that there are things that I miss when we're talking, but then I'm going through it again, and then I pick up things that I missed the first time around, and that is the true wisdom. So we'll put all the
Great.
information that you shared on parts of it on our show notes, so that folks can get in touch with you and get to know you better. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I agree, as being a podcast host, is having these experts on my show. I also, while editing, learn so much still. And it's a part of the journey, which I love it. And thanks for having me. This was so good. I hope you took away some things. I've also learned from you. I learned through the conversations as well. And talk soon.